Obama's up there telling the press corps that China has a very different political system than we do. Yeah, maybe, but not for long. Look at, folks, I want to talk about spending here for just a second. My patience is wearing out. One of the things I find, and it's good this is happening, is I find myself occasionally not saying things because I think so many of you already know it, understand it, get it, and I'm always looking to move forward. But this, what would you cut? What would you cut? Well, you're going to cut Medicare, you're going to cut Social Security. You don't have to cut any of that to achieve what we want to achieve. You don't have to cut any of it. Certainly not at first. I'll give you the explanation here in just a second. But you know what my answer would be? If I were John Boehner, and of course I'm not John Boehner, if I were John Boehner and I was constantly being peppered by the press corps, what are you going to cut? What are you going to cut? You know what I would say? We got to pass the bill first to find out what's in it. What do you mean by that? Well, that's what Pelosi said about health care. You guys didn't care a whit about what was in the health care bill. The Republicans said, what's in this thing? It's 2,000 pages. Pelosi said, we have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. Everybody, whoa, okay, well, fine. Republicans have a budget cut bill. We're not going to tell you what's in it till we pass it. How does that feel? You like doing business that way when the Democrats ran the show on health care. How about it for spending cuts? We got to pass the bill first before we'll tell you, before you can find out. Let's look at it this way. We're here. Let me just give you a off the top of my head ballpark list of things to cut. We're going to cut Obamacare. That's going to save several trillion. We're going to cut the EPA, which has had a budget increase of about 130% over the last 2 years. And the EPA is getting in the way of the private sector. The EPA now has dictatorial powers over carbon dioxide emissions, and the FDA is getting close to having that kind of power on drugs and the things that they oversee. So cut the EPA, not eliminate here, not just cut it. We're going to cut the number of bureaucrats by 20%. We're going to cut their salaries to bring them more in line with the private sector. We're going to cut government across the board by at least 10%. We're going to abolish the FCC. And the reason we're going to abolish the FCC is because the FCC is getting into the control of free speech business, and that's not their charter. We will abolish the Federal Election Commission. There's nothing more worthless than the FEC. They deal with complaints after the fact, and if anything, a slap on the wrist happens, all the policing power, all the intimidation that they claim to have doesn't intimidate anybody into anything. Besides that, the FEC seeks to control political free speech, so you get rid of that. We'll abolish all of Obama's czars. They're not even constitutional. We will abolish stimulus spending, and TARP will sell off 20% or more of the federal landmass that the federal government owns. The federal government owns about 25% of all the land in the United States. I'm just getting started. Imagine what somebody who's familiar with all the ins and outs of the federal government could do. We could cut the number of government vehicles by 25%. Cut government office space by 20%. Don't tell me there aren't places to cut here. Responsible, reasonable, certainly excessive places to cut. The biggest savings of all would be getting rid of Obamacare. You cut the EPA, you get rid of the FCC, get rid of the there's any number of things. All you need is the guts to do it. And I'm going to tell you this, if the Republicans would simply announce specifics and then be prepared to deal with the stuck pig reaction that they're going to get, they would win this next election in the biggest landslide there has ever been. If they would just say they're going to do this stuff, stick to it, and start trying right now, they would win in 2012 with the biggest landslide ever. This is right. This is exactly what a majority of the American people voted for. The American people voted against all of this new spending. They voted against an overpowerful, over-involved federal bureaucracy. This is what's bugging the American people. Everywhere they turn in life, there's a government obstacle that has to be overcome someplace. Many of them. Get rid of a few of them, just to start. Don't get tied down in this where you're going to Social Security, Medicare, all that run. They'll try to steer us there, but screw it. There's any number of places. Let's get other people in a panic here besides the usual suspects of Social Security recipients. Those people aren't getting cost of living increases anyway because the government's not reporting any inflation. Ha, 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 ha. So I don't know. To me, it's not that tough. But again, I'm not a politician. I don't have to get votes. But I still think doing something like this, announcing it, stick to it. And there would be such an overwhelming support on the part of the American people. And there'd be opponents, and they would be loud, and they'd be panicked, and there might be blood in the streets. Who knows? You got to expect that to happen. I mean, the Democrat Party has led people to believe that their lives are dependent on all of this. Well, we can't sustain it, for crying out loud. $14 trillion in debt. I'm only half joking here. They run around these mealy mouths in the press. Where are you going to cut? Where are you going to cut? We hear that Berkeley is going to start paying for addictomy operations. It really is. Is it a budget priority here?